Well, let's start about, it's considering the temperature outside, it's a little weird to talk about heat emergencies, but don't worry, we'll get to cold emergencies right after this, which probably would be more beneficial at this time of the year for you. Now, summertime, this information will be beneficial for you because in North Texas we have that problem where we have a lot of humidity. Not as much as Houston or down south or even other places in the United States, but humidity, when we look at heat emergencies or heat, it's like it says here, it's exposure to the hot, humid environment causing the body to generate too much heat. All right? An abnormal amount of body temperature or heat is called hyperthermia. Hyper right above, thermia for heat. So when you look at this, you have the body temperature is going up. Now, we have to understand how the body cools itself before we can understand a little bit more about heat-related emergencies. We sweat in order for the body to cool. Now, a person who can't sweat, doesn't have sweat glands, which there are people like that, they don't sweat, they can't live in North Texas. They can't live in anywhere that's hot because they would never be able to go outside. You have to be able to sweat. And I'm not talking like pouring off your head sweat. We perspire, and you guys hopefully know this, that's why we wear deodorant all the time. You know what I mean? We're producing sweat all the time. That's the way that the body cools. We're sort of the evaporative coolers. We sweat, and the wind, the air blows across us, and it cools off. Without the sweat, we're not able to cool off. That's important to remember later on as we work through this. So sweating's good. We want to be able to sweat and cool our body temperatures down. So we look at what causes a lot of this. Climate, like we just talked about, North Texas, very humid, very hot. You should be sweating all the time while you're outside in that type of environment. Exercise, obviously, the very young or very old, their body temperatures are regulated a little different. When you get really old, the thin skin's down and you're not able to control the temperature as much. That's one of the purposes behind the skin, is to regulate temperature. So, we're pre-existing, I'm trying to think off the cuff what would be the problem, I just can't remember. We might get back to that, but it's not really that important because we look at the signs and symptoms, and then certain medications or drugs will increase body temperature. Cocaine, gets a person hyperthermic. Different other kind of illegal drugs can get the patient hyperthermic. All right. Alcohol, in a sense, you see the TV and they're cold and they say, "Oh, give me a shot of bourbon or whiskey or something to warm me up inside." Yeah, the little dog, with the whiskey thing. It is true when a person, like you're outside and you drink like a whiskey, it does feels like it warms you up inside, but it doesn't actually, because after too much, then you're unable to feel cold. And then you don't know if you're getting hypothermic. So alcohol in the face of cold weather is bad, but frostbite, yeah. So those are just some conditions that look at it, but we're not too concerned about that because where we are right now, we're just looking at signs and symptoms. We base our treatment off signs and symptoms. So the three type of heat emergencies that we're going to talk about are heat cramps. Everybody, unless you're just a couch potato, has had probably heat cramps, right? You're out, you're playing, you fall, or you're doing something, you start cramping. You get cramps, heat cramps. All right? No problem with the heat cramps. They're not life-threatening. They tend to resolve themselves once the person gets inside, cools off, rehydrates. Remember, we live in a state of dehydration almost. Almost everybody does because we don't drink enough water. How do you think sweat is produced? Water. Right? So you have to have the right amount of water in your body. You have to be well hydrated so you can sweat. So in these heat cramps, they start really sweating and they start cramping because the muscles are they're depleted on the electrolytes, and we start to cramp, and so we get rehydrated. So they could cramp because of dehydration, right? So we get rehydrated. We might, if we figure we sweat a lot, and we need like a Gatorade or one of those sports drinks that do that. Remember, when you're giving someone advice over hydration and these sports drinks, the sports drink is a replacement drink. It means that you've had to sweat out the electrolytes to replace them. If you drink a Gatorade or whatever they are, the other brands, Powerade or something like that, without the need, then you're just drinking sugar water, flavored sugar water. It's like a soda. You might as well drink a soda. There's no difference. Sugar is a dehydrant. Sugar is going to draw fluid out of the cells. Sugar is going to dehydrate you. So is caffeine. That's why a lot of people especially in the South, they get out and they're really hot, and they I want a drink, I want a Coke, thirsty. You're going to dehydrate. Or tea. Tea has a lot of caffeine in it. Tea will dehydrate you. When you think about hydration, you have to think about water. And thank to Coach Coward, he gave me some knowledge on the hydration part. Years ago, said it's a 3-to-1. You need to drink 3 times more water than you drink like a Gatorade. So let's say you're out, you're working hard, you're doing something, you start getting these heat cramps. Replenish your body with water, and if you drink Gatorade, let's say you drink 20 ounces of Gatorade, you need to replace that with 60 ounces of water. So it's a 3-to-1 ratio there. But with heat cramps, so your patient or whoever you're with is having heat cramps, and you get them inside, you cool them down. All right, get them in maybe the air conditioner or a cooler environment. Start to fan them a little bit. You can take tap water, not ice water. Never ice water. You change the balance too much when let's say on this end of the ruler they're hot, right? And you pour ice water on them. They go all the way to the other end of the spectrum really quick, and that can kill them. All right. So tap water. Use tap water. Maybe with a towel, wet them a little bit, fan them, because now you're replacing your sweat with a tap water. You're fanning them a little bit, getting the air blowing across them, and sort of, it's called passively cooling them. So if you're passively cooling them off, loosen the clothing. If you start to rehydrate, make sure that you rehydrate slowly, because in all 3 of these, one of the things is nausea. One of the signs and symptoms of nausea, or symptoms, is nausea. So you get in there and they're nauseated. If you give them too much water, they're going to throw up. Vomiting is an airway concern. Right? So you want to be careful here with the fluids, but you sort of start slowly hydrating them. All right? And then everybody good on heat cramps. Now heat cramps, once the cramp goes away and you feel better, you can go back out and go back to work or back into the football game or whatever you're doing, okay? No big problem. One of the signs and symptoms you see in heat cramps is excessive sweating, sort of hot skin, hot to the touch, nausea, maybe some dizziness, maybe a little vomiting in the cramps, right? right? Abdominal cramps, usually. I mean, you can start cramping in any muscle, but usually abdominal cramps. All right. Everybody good there? We'll get back to the other two in just a second. When you look at this algorithm, remember in medicine they use these little boxes and algorithms to. That's the way you learn everything. So you have a patient that's exposed to the hot environment. They're sweating like a pig that doesn't sweat. All right, real heavy diaphoresis, profuse. If you want to use the medical term, they're profuse diaphoresis. All right, cramps, abdomen, lower legs, not too hot, right? So possible heat cramps. Severe cramps, moist pale skin. It leads you over to heat exhaustion, and then down in here, and we'll talk about all this in a minute. Maybe they're having a seizure, they're coma, they're hot and dry, they're not sweating at all, and they have a possible heat stroke. So that's how this sort of lays out in this algorithm, but we're going to lay it out just a little different, maybe a little bit easier for you to remember. All right? Now, muscle cramps, rapid breathing, rapid pulse, these are proportional, right? Normal mental status. Fix the problem, cool the body temperature down, cramps go away. More than likely you go out and enjoy the rest of your day. Rehydrate, remember to keep hydrated. Now, heat exhaustion, on the other hand, it's a little bit different story. Heat exhaustion can work into a true medical emergency. When you look at someone with heat exhaustion, heavy perspiration, I can't speak. Heavy perspiration, sweating. They're sweating like profusely. They do feel they start getting weak. They could be cramping. The breathing, the pulse. If in the very later stages you could get altered mental status, but not really. I mean, that would have to be very late. But write this off to the side because these are the true signs. This is a hallmark sign and symptoms of heat exhaustion. It's profuse sweating with cold, clammy skin. Profuse sweating and cold, clammy skin. Because if you walk up, you're making your good general first impression, and you walk up to somebody and they're sweating profusely, and you reach out and touch them, what would you anticipate their skin? Hot, yeah. But it's cold, clammy. It's cold, and you go, ugh. That's that yucky feeling to it. So profuse sweating, cold, clammy skin are the two hallmark signs of that. You still have the nausea, vomiting somewhere in here. Maybe it's on the next slide. No. Add in nausea, vomiting, and they always get nauseated. You get overheated, nausea comes. Vomiting follows nausea. So you have a patient that's nauseated, they're vomiting, cold, clammy skin, thinking, okay, heat exhaustion. How do I treat that? It's treatable. Okay? You take the patient out of the environment. Obviously BSI. You can activate EMS, or if they come into your clinic or ER, you won't have to do that. But you can, you want to start a treatment on them, and it's very similar to heat cramps. You can wet them down with tap water, put them in front of the fan, put them in front of the air conditioner, sort of start cooling them off, right? They may need IV fluids to rehydrate. So you can heat exhaustion, you're thinking, yeah, they're sweating, cold, clammy, nausea, vomiting, that heat exhaustion. You might as well, in the hospital environment, you might as well start an IV, start rehydrating them intravenously. If they rehydrate much faster, if you had the availability of IV bags during the summer, I mean, because a lot of people get heat exhaustion during the summer, especially like me. I like working out in the heat of the day. Like in the summertime when I mow, and I have a lot of grass to mow, it takes me about 3 hours to mow. I usually mow during the heat of the day. I like to get out where it's hot, sweat, and work outside. Yeah, it's a little cooler. Yeah, but that's just me. But you could get heat exhaustion, and then all of a sudden you need rehydration. IV fluids rehydrate you much faster than by water. But if you don't have that availability, then you can have the patient slowly starting to rehydrate with water. You have to be very careful when you start rehydrating them. You have to rehydrate them. So if you have to rehydrate them by water, make sure that they do it slowly, because they're going to throw that back up. And get the water in them first. So if you plan on saying they got the little twitches and they got little muscle spasms because of the lack of electrolytes in their bodies, everybody's had those little spasms, right? Yeah. That's a electrolyte deal. You drink a Gatorade and it'll go away in about 5 minutes. It's cool. I watched it. I had it happen. Had a little twitch over here in my arm, and it was really bugging me. So I just mixed one of those, the powder, drank some of it. In about 5 minutes, it stopped twitching. I was like, oh, okay, well, that worked. You know, but carefully rehydrate as you. I lost my screen. There we go. Carefully rehydrate. There we go. Carefully rehydrate them with water. The way that we're going to work this is, like in your scenarios, you're being in a hospital setting, so you would start an IV, probably 2 IVs, with normal saline, okay? Saline is isotonic. Iso meaning what?
Salt?
Oh, very good.
Salt.
Neutral.
Neutral.
Isotonic meaning neutral. Tonic fluid, right? It's a neutral fluid. It won't draw fluid out of the cells, and it won't put fluid in the cell. It won't overexpand the cell. It's a neutral solution. It will sit there, and the cells will naturally absorb it. Okay? So, as you remove them from the heat, you're cooling them down. Not a huge problem. Really, they get out, you cool them back down, you get the body temperature back down to the norm, and rehydrate them. They're going to be tired, let them rest. But here's the difference between heat exhaustion. You're done. Once you experience heat exhaustion, you're done for 2 or 3 days. You probably shouldn't get back out into the hot environment for at least 2 or 3 days. Because once you experience a heat-related emergency, heat exhaustion or heat stroke, you're more susceptible to that heat again. Used to, I don't know, I think they're getting a lot better. You know, like in football, especially in high school, they'd have 2-a-days. Well, they'd run these guys and they wouldn't let them drink water. They're trying to toughen them up, you know. And what they don't realize is they're trying to kill them. But literally, I mean, you have to have water. The body, when you say, like you're outside and you say, man, I'm thirsty, I need a drink of water, and the coach is over there going, no, that'll make you weak. You should look up at him and go, you're an idiot. My body is telling me, the thirst centers in my brain is telling me I need water. All right? And you can't ignore those, or you shouldn't ignore those. So once you have this heat exhaustion, it takes a few days to recover from that. If you go right back out to the hot environment, you risk the potential heat stroke, or at least falling back into heat exhaustion. You don't want to do that. So the treatment here, cool them off, passively cool them off. You can wet their clothes, you know, with tap water, fan them, if you're away from the hospital environment, let them start sipping on water and just get them cooled down. They're going to need, at heat exhaustion, they're going to need some electrolyte replacement. So they're going to need some Gatorade and stuff, you know. So no big deal there. We can fix that pretty easy. And then just don't allow them to go back out into the hot environment. But remember those signs: cold, clammy skin, profuse sweating. Now let's talk about the big one: heat stroke. Heat stroke is a life-threatening event. By definition, heat stroke is when the body temperature has risen above 105 degrees. Above 105 degrees is life-threatening. You can have a medical heat stroke. You know, you can be septic, have an infection or something, and the body temperature shoots up. You know, most pediatricians say with toddlers and younger children to let them cook for a while. They start getting a fever, 101 to about 103. They say, no, don't give them any Tylenol or Motrin, let them cook. That's the fever's the way the body's trying to kill the pathogen. Adults, on the other hand, we can't go 99 and we're feeling bad. 100, we're in the bed. 101, probably wishing you were going to the hospital. So, I mean, we have a very small window for fever. But here we're talking about a person that's out in a hot environment. The hallmark signs here, before we get into the rest of these, is no sweating. It says little or no, but no sweating. They're dry. And their skin is hot to the touch. So you go up, they're not sweating, and you touch them and their skin is hot. And that's a hallmark sign of heat stroke. Now you add in the other one, rapid pulse, weakness, hot, dry skin. There will be, as this progresses, this is not necessarily a late sign. Altered mental status is more of an early sign of this. You would still check a D-stick, altered mental status, right? Always check a D-stick. But when they're not sweating, you walk up, they're hot to the touch. I mean, their skin is hot. You know it's not a diabetic thing. But you would still do, because of that always thing, you would still do a D-stick. All right? They've lost the ability to cool down their body. So they can't cool off. They're burning up. Now picture this. Because we went to the lab, we held a brain in our hand, right? And you remember that the brain is made of just fat, lipids and proteins. And if you hold it in your hand long enough, the thing will just dissolve. Now what we did this really cool experiment one time in class. We went over here to the cooking place, and we got, because the brain is the consistency of stick butter, so we warmed up water to about 98. That number sounds familiar? Normal temperature. We put the stick butter in there. Not too much happened at 98. We warmed that water up to 105, and the butter started sloughing off. You could see the butter starting to melt. The outsides of it just started sort of sloughing off in the water. Now, what is the brain set in?
School?
Cerebral spinal fluid, liquid, right? So now your body temperature is 105. Is that temperature hot?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Heat stroke, now I'm not saying your brain's melting inside, but I do say that you're killing a lot of brain cells. This is life-threatening. You've got to get them cooled down. If you don't get them cooled off, they're going to die. Now, I'm not saying pour cold ice water on them. All right? You will kill them by pouring ice water on them, or you have a high probability of killing them. Oh. Okay, so the treatment for heat stroke is not passively cooling them off, but aggressively cooling them off. But I mean, not aggressive like taking ice water and pouring it over their head. When we say aggressively cooling them off, we're still going to get them out of the hot environment. We're still going to put water on them, fan them, get them in front of the air conditioner. They definitely need IV fluids, okay? Because they're going to be all cramped up and they're going to start contracting and drawing up, all right? You need a lot of IV fluids to get through. And when I say aggressive cooling, what I mean is take ice packs. Now, if you don't have chemical ice packs, you can take ice packs, but it's preferred chemical, the ones you break, and because the temperature on those are controlled. But a lot of times those are not with you. So if you can take ice packs and put them under the armpits, okay? Put ice packs in the groin, over the femoral arteries, here and here. Put the ice packs in the armpits, and put the ice packs on both sides of the neck. Now, the thing with ice pack, is you should never put an ice pack directly on the skin. So always have a slight barrier there. Don't freeze the skin. I know they do it in athletics all the time. I do it too. I put that ice right on my skin, but I'm very cautious with it. But make sure that if you're using ice, put ice bags, put them in their groins, their armpit, and on their necks. But make sure that you're placing a barrier on the skin. All right? Yeah, napkin or something will do fine. Just where it doesn't have direct contact. That's what I'm talking about outside of the hospital environment, to sort of aggressively cooling them off. Now, we haven't talked about cold-related emergencies, but one of the first things you start doing when you get cold is what? Shiver. Right. So if your patient starts to shiver, what is that telling you? You're too cold. Take the ice packs off. Okay? The heat stroke, you may even have to ventilate the patient. Okay? So you might have to go back through and start ventilating here and doing airway support. But we want to aggressively cool them off by doing the ice packs. What we do with the IV fluid is, in an ambulance, I would hang that in front of the air conditioner, and then I would take the chemical ice packs around the tubing up here in the chamber to cool that fluid off. Alright, so I'd cool that fluid. They'd have cool fluid running through them, air conditioner blowing on them, ice packs in the neck, their armpits and their groin, alright, and monitor their temperature. Now, the thing with heat stroke is you are definitely out of the ball game for a long time. You shouldn't go out in the hot environment for a very, very long time. Because you're very susceptible to another heat-related injury. The other thing that heat stroke causes, a friend of mine had heat stroke and he's lost a lot of his long-term memory. Hence the sloughing off of the butter, killing of the brain cells. You lose a lot of long-term memory. His would mean like he couldn't remember what he had for breakfast, the day before. And you might think that short term, but a couple of days there's parts of his days that he can't remember. It's not that he's just forgetful, it's gone. He can't, that part of his brain won't hold that information anymore. Yeah. It ran out his ears. But truly a medical emergency when you start looking at this, life-threatening. Now, in the hospital, if you get these guys come in, they bring them in, they're still doing all the same stuff to them, except they will put them in a cooler. They have the same thing with heat. Put them in like it's a blanket that goes on top of them that will blow cold air or warm air on them, depending on the emergency, and start cooling them off. Now, the thing is, never say never, right? you might see, I've seen it firsthand in the desert. The convicts out there had this big tub, this horse trough full of ice water. And they flew this one guy in that had heat stroke out in the desert. They took him out of the helicopter, they ran him onto this horse trough, and they threw him in the horse trough full of ice water. Okay, because he was dying. And the convicts, their job is to make sure that ice water stays a certain temperature. That's hard to do in the desert, you know. But they threw him in this ice water. They pulled him out. They took him in. But they had a doctor there with them that could resuscitate him. That is on the extreme end of heat stroke. All right? That's just something that I would do or you should do. If you have to do that, you better be ready to resuscitate the patient. That's why in all these football games, especially now we're into December, they take the Gatorade thing and dump it over the old coach's head, right? I'm waiting for the day that coach goes, and drops dead right on the thing. Because, I'm not like waiting for it, but I'm telling you, someone...
No, you said you were waiting for it.
Oh, yeah, put that out there. Anyway, like I said, homeostasis, right? This guy's all nice and warm. He's got his very expensive football jacket on and his hat, and he's warm, and all of a sudden he's floating along. They win. Now he's all happy, and now they dump this cold, freezing water on him, and his body temperature goes from normal, maybe a little above normal because all the clothes he has on, to boom, to freezing cold. All right? And the heart goes, don't like that. And goes into V-fib, drops dead. Right there. Then those guys doing this EMS standbys will use their skills, right? But it's a problem because then they have to dry him off. He's all wet. So they can't even put the AED on him right away because they have to get him dried off. You just pour Gatorade all over him. I'm telling you, a big shock like that will do this. Okay? It will hurt the patient and potentially kill them. Questions there on hot, heat related?